He left for work on a Monday morning, May 12, 2022. Carrying his usual briefcase, he waved goodbye to a neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. It was 8:30 a.m. This was the last confirmed sighting of Ethan Croft, a man who appeared to vanish into thin air. Why would a meticulous, routine-driven man simply disappear? The official narrative focuses on a missing person, but the evidence, when examined closely, suggests something far more deliberate. Let's break down the initial hours of this strange case. His wife, Sarah Croft, told investigators she first tried to call Ethan at 6:15 p.m. that same day. The call went straight to voicemail. She assumed he was working late, perhaps a common occurrence for them. But the next morning, May 13th, when Ethan still hadn't returned, Sarah called his office. His employer confirmed a critical detail: Ethan Croft never arrived at work on May 12th. That's a significant gap. From 8:30 a.m. to late evening, nearly 12 hours unaccounted for. The timeline shown to us by authorities paints a picture of a concerned wife and a sudden disappearance. Yet, what doesn't quite add up is how quickly Ethan Croft seemed to erase himself from the city of Boston without any struggle, any trace. The records detail Sarah's increasing anxiety, documented in her call logs. First, patience, then mild concern, shifting to alarm as the hours stretched. By 9 a.m. on May 13th, the call to his office confirms the worst. He hadn't just gone quiet, he was gone. This wasn't a case of a missed call. This was a man failing to appear at his highly structured job, a detail that sharply contradicts his known habits. Ethan Croft was famously precise, known for his almost ritualistic daily patterns. For him to miss an entire workday without explanation? That detail matters. It forces us to ask, was this an accident? Or was it the first calculated move in an elaborate disappearance? Empty apartment. Unanswered calls. Sarah Croft tried to reach her husband at 6:15 p.m., and his phone went straight to voicemail. She assumed he was simply working late, a common occurrence. But when morning arrived on May 13th, and Ethan still wasn't home, the assumption began to unravel. That's where it gets strange. The initial calm quickly gave way to a growing unease. She called Ethan's office shortly after 9 a.m., a call that delivered a stark and immediate contradiction to her assumption. His employer confirmed he had never arrived at work on May 12th. Let me walk you through what happened next. The timeline shows Sarah, now deeply concerned, filed an official missing person report with the Boston Police Department by 2 p.m. that same day. This was no longer a delayed commute, it was a disappearance. Detective Miller was assigned to the case. This detail matters because it marks the official start of the investigation, shifting it from a domestic concern to a police matter. What doesn't add up is the suddenness. Ethan Croft, a man of routine, vanished without a trace between leaving his apartment and arriving at a job he never reached. No one saw him. No one heard from him. The empty apartment offered no immediate answers. No signs of struggle, no forced entry. Just an absence. The records confirm that the first 24 hours provided no clear path, only questions. Where did a man like Ethan Croft go in those few short hours, and why would he simply disappear? A life interrupted. The apartment itself offered few answers, no forced entry, no signs of a struggle. But amidst the ordinary clutter of Ethan Croft's life, Detective Miller discovered something out of place, a single, unsigned note on his desk. It read simply, "Start anew." A cryptic message. Was it a farewell, a declaration, or something more unsettling? This wasn't the note of a man kidnapped, nor of a man in distress. It suggested intent, a plan. It raised questions about the careful routines we witnessed in the previous chapter, of the morning coffee and the usual briefcase. But what exactly was he starting anew from? The investigation then shifted, not just to finding a missing person, but to understanding why someone would choose to vanish. Weeks later, on May 20th, a new piece of evidence surfaced. Ethan Croft's car was located, abandoned in a long-term parking lot at Logan International Airport. The implications were immediate. He didn't just disappear from his home, he left the city. But the airport's vast surveillance system, known for its extensive coverage, offered no visual confirmation of Ethan entering the lot. No footage of him parking the car. This detail matters. How could a vehicle be placed in such a public, monitored location without its owner being captured on camera? Was it a deliberate blind spot? Or was someone else involved in moving the car? The lack of surveillance footage at Logan raised the first serious doubt about whether Ethan was truly alone in his movements, or if the anonymous note was part of a larger, more orchestrated deception. The car, seemingly a clue, now became another layer of carefully constructed mystery. What was Ethan Croft escaping from, and who, if anyone, was helping him disappear without a trace? The anonymous tip. After the discovery of Ethan Croft's abandoned car at Logan International, a car with no security footage of him entering the lot, the investigation stalled. Police had no leads, no suspects, and a note reading "Start Anew" that offered more questions than answers. Sarah Croft, his wife, was left in a void of uncertainty. Then, on June 5, 2022, nearly 3 weeks after Ethan's disappearance, a new piece of information emerged. Not from official channels, not from a breakthrough in forensic analysis, but from an anonymous source. It was a tip, an email, sent directly to Detective Miller's precinct. The message was concise, almost disturbingly so. It suggested Ethan Croft might be living under an assumed identity. And it provided a location: Phoenix, Arizona. This wasn't just a random tip. This was a direct, actionable lead that challenged the entire initial premise of the investigation. Until then, Ethan Croft was a missing person. A victim, perhaps. Now, the possibility arose that he was an architect of his own disappearance. That he had consciously chosen to vanish. Detective Miller, a seasoned investigator, understood the implications immediately. An anonymous tip can be a red herring, a distraction, or it can be the key that unlocks a case. The detail about Phoenix, Arizona felt specific. Too specific to be entirely random. What did the sender know, and why did they choose to remain anonymous? This isn't a small inconsistency. This shifts the very nature of the case, from a search for a missing man to an investigation into a deliberate act. The quiet life, the meticulous routine, the respected position in Boston's financial world, all of it now cast under a new, suspicious light. The note found in his apartment, "Start Anew," suddenly gains a much darker meaning, a premeditated intention rather than a desperate plea. The timeline, as we understood it, was about to be completely rewritten. Who was this anonymous source, and what did they stand to gain or lose by sending that email? Tracing digital footprints. The anonymous tip had provided a location: Phoenix, Arizona, a city of millions. Finding one man who didn't want to be found, based on an email, seemed like trying to find a single grain of sand on a sprawling desert. Nearly impossible. But Detective Miller had a lead, a digital thread she could pull on. The first step in verifying the tip: tracing Ethan Croft's last known digital footprint. What she found, according to police records dated June 10, 2022, was a meticulous, almost obsessive effort to erase himself. In the weeks leading up to May 12th, there were encrypted communications, not just one or two, but a series of exchanges that escalated in frequency. It suggested planning, not a spontaneous decision. And the money trail showed something else. Purchases, small at first, then larger, for burner phones. Not one, but a pattern of them. That detail matters. Because burner phones, devices difficult to trace to an owner, are the tools of those wishing to disappear, or those involved in activities they don't want linked back to them. The question wasn't just if Ethan Croft had planned his disappearance, but how extensively. Miller's team then expanded their search, focusing on any financial transactions or digital interactions that might have connected Ethan Croft to Phoenix. No direct flights under his name. No hotel bookings or car rentals. The silence was almost deafening until it wasn't. Deep in the metadata of one of those encrypted communications, a subtle IP address anomaly appeared. A fleeting connection to a server, registered in Arizona. It was a flicker of light in the digital darkness. Not enough to confirm anything definitively, but enough to corroborate the anonymous tip in a way that wasn't random. Someone was trying very hard to hide, and that effort was leaving faint, almost invisible echoes in the vast digital landscape. The evidence suggested a carefully constructed vanishing act and a potential destination. The pieces were beginning to align. The double life revealed. The anonymous tip had landed like a stone in still water, disrupting everything. Detective Miller, after weeks tracing digital breadcrumbs with growing frustration, now had a name: Arthur Finch. The email had been specific: Phoenix, Arizona. But how to connect the dots between a missing Boston executive and a man living a new life hundreds of miles away? That's where the sophisticated tools came into play. Here's what the investigation revealed, building on the digital trails we discussed. On July 1, 2022, investigators applied advanced facial recognition software. The target: security footage from Logan International Airport. The task: cross-reference images against the anonymous tip's description. The result was immediate and unsettling. A precise match. The face of Ethan Croft, the man who vanished from Boston, appearing under a new name: Arthur Finch. He was captured boarding a flight to Phoenix. This was not a random disappearance. This was a meticulously planned escape. The clarity of the image, the casual way he moved through security, the complete lack of hesitation, it all painted a picture of a man entirely comfortable in his new identity. What doesn't add up, however, is the lack of any prior surveillance footage of him entering the airport, preceding the discovery of his abandoned car. The official version leaves this unexplained, presenting a gap in the timeline that bears closer scrutiny. Now, armed with this crucial piece of visual evidence, Miller's focus shifted. The paper trail began. Ethan Croft, or rather Arthur Finch, was actively living, working, and building a new life. This wasn't a man running scared and hiding in the shadows. This was someone who had made a deliberate, calculated decision to become someone else entirely. The implications were clear. The cryptic note left in his apartment, "Start anew," was less a cry for help and more a statement of intent. That detail matters, because it repositioned the entire investigation from a search for a victim to a hunt for a perpetrator. We now had a face. We now had a location. But the question remained: what truly compelled Ethan Croft to shed his old life and embrace a double existence? Crossing borders, changing faces. Let me walk you through what happened. Detective Miller arrived in Phoenix, a stark contrast to the familiar chill of Boston. Her objective: locate the man identified as Arthur Finch. What she found was not a man in hiding, but a man rebuilding a life. Finch, an architect, appeared to have fully reinvented himself. The timeline shows this was on July 15, 2022. He was working freelance, building a new identity brick by brick, seemingly far from the embezzlement schemes in Boston. This isn't just a simple name change, it's a complete erasure of who Ethan Croft once was. Think about the audacity, the meticulous planning required to construct an entirely new persona, from profession to daily routine. That detail matters because it points to intent, not just flight. Miller's approach was methodical. She observed him, confirming the facial recognition match. The evidence was irrefutable. 2 days later, on July 17, 2022, she made her move. She confronted Arthur Finch. Initially, he denied everything. The man across from her maintained his new identity with a convincing, almost eerie dedication. He looked her in the eye and claimed no knowledge of Ethan Croft. But the record shows Miller persisted. The discrepancies were too severe. The past, it seems, always catches up. Eventually, the facade crumbled. Arthur Finch confessed. He admitted he was Ethan Croft, but his version of events introduced a new layer of complexity. His claim: he needed to escape a dangerous situation. This wasn't just about abandoning a life. It was, he suggested, about survival. But was this a genuine plea, or another calculated maneuver from a man proven to be a master of deceit? The official version then begins to split here, between simple evasion and something far more threatening. This statement from Croft raises an important question. What dangerous situation could compel a man to disappear so completely? Hidden motives, lingering doubts. After Miller confronted Arthur Finch, a new layer of the deception began to unravel. He eventually confessed, yes, but what he claimed he was escaping, a dangerous situation, was now under deeper scrutiny. That's where the investigation truly shifted. On July 20, 2022, just 3 days after his confession, investigators uncovered something far more extensive, evidence linking Ethan's previous financial dealings to a large-scale embezzlement scheme. This wasn't just a simple disappearance anymore. This was a calculated escape from legal repercussions. The note on his desk, "Start anew," now took on a more sinister meaning, moving from a personal crisis to a criminal evasion. What doesn't add up is the sheer scale. A lone man, even as meticulous as Ethan Croft, usually doesn't orchestrate a complex financial fraud and a complete identity change without significant help. The official story of him simply trying to escape a dangerous situation felt thin, almost like a pre-planned alibi for when he was inevitably caught. The paper trail, when carefully dissected, revealed transactions that pointed to more than one actor. Complex offshore accounts. Shell corporations. These aren't the moves of an amateur or a man simply looking for a quiet escape from personal danger. These are the tools of organized financial crime. This discovery raises an important question. If Ethan Croft was fleeing legal trouble, who else was involved in the embezzlement? And more critically, who helped him disappear so completely? Miller's team began to dig deeper into Ethan's digital footprint, scrutinizing encrypted messages that had previously been dismissed as mere attempts to secure his new life. Now they were seen as potential communications with an unseen accomplice. The investigation was no longer about a man who vanished. It was about a criminal network, and Ethan Croft was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The timeline shows a careful preparation, not a panicked flight. That detail matters, because it points to planning, and planning often requires collaboration. The unseen accomplice. The confession of Arthur Finch, formerly Ethan Croft, about escaping a dangerous situation was only part of the story. Because on August 1, 2022, a crucial piece of evidence surfaced: encrypted messages. These weren't just personal notes. They revealed communication between Ethan and an unknown accomplice, hinting at a wider criminal network and a meticulously planned escape. What doesn't add up? Why would a high-stakes embezzlement scheme, already complex, require such detailed, almost strategic planning for a single individual's disappearance? The messages weren't about evasion. They were about coordination. This suggests a silent partner. Someone working in the shadows, orchestrating moves, anticipating responses. The timeline shows a distinct shift around this point. The investigation pivoted from solely tracking Ethan Croft to uncovering who else was involved. This unseen accomplice, initially just a digital ghost, soon took shape. On August 15, 2022, the ghost received a name: Marcus Thorne. Thorne was a former business associate of Ethan's. What raises an important question is that Thorne vanished shortly after Ethan's disappearance. This isn't a coincidence, it's a pattern. The official version, focused on Ethan's individual escape route, overlooked this synchronicity initially. The discovery of Thorne's involvement changed the entire dynamic of the case, suggesting that Ethan Croft wasn't just a man running from his past. He was a piece in a much larger puzzle, guided by unseen hands. And those hands had a name now. The price of freedom. August 25th, 6 p.m., Ethan Croft, the man who meticulously vanished, faced a new reality. He was arrested in Phoenix, not as Arthur Finch, but as Ethan Croft, on charges of fraud and obstruction of justice. The second identity had dissolved. This was the price of his freedom, a freedom built on a lie. He consistently denied the more severe allegations of a larger criminal network, a network first hinted at by those encrypted messages. Meanwhile, the search continued for the unseen accomplice. Then, on September 10th, the final piece fell into place. Marcus Thorne, Ethan's former business associate and the architect of their elaborate escape, was apprehended. He was caught attempting to cross the border into Mexico using yet another fake identity. This wasn't merely an arrest, it was confirmation. Confirmation of a premeditated plan, a carefully constructed alternate reality, and a conspiracy far grander than anyone initially anticipated. The paper trail, once so convoluted, now led directly to him. What does this case reveal about the promises of a new beginning? Ethan Croft believed he could shed his past. But the evidence, the timelines, the lingering questions, they always resurface. His carefully crafted second identity, Arthur Finch, was undone not by a single misstep, but by the relentless pursuit of facts. It reminds us that often the truth isn't found in grand, dramatic gestures, but in the quiet, persistent work of tracing digital footprints and connecting seemingly disparate events. The official narrative, initially so fragmented, tells a story of calculated deceit and the illusion of escape. But escape, for Ethan, was merely a delay, a temporary suspension of consequences. The lingering question remains: how many others like Thorne exist, operating in the shadows? This case is closed for now. If you found this investigation compelling, please like this video, subscribe to the evidence log, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'll be unstacking another case file soon.